rural-urban disparities I was reading so much about. So I ended up in India. And in India, one of the first things that people from the US might notice is poverty. So I did what every naive American would do, build a school. Especially because in rural areas, I had this thinking around, they can't get to school, so why don't we just bring the school to them? So let's make a school on wheels. So we constructed this 50-seater Mahindra bus. It was tactically put together as an owl because they were significant to the region, and it looks sort of like a version of Share. And we hired teachers to teach out of the school, and it serviced 4 after-school programs in the northern villages of West Bengal. But in about a few weeks, the teachers came to me from the city and said, these kids are too shy. They simply can't pick up English and math as quickly as the kids in the city. As I spent more time in the community, I didn't see these kids as being shy. When they danced, when they played music, when they conducted their crafts, they were bold. This girl was told that she couldn't pass to the 2nd standard, but when she stepped with her Santali traditional dance, I wanted a Juilliard recruiter to be there because she would shine. What I learned as I spent more time in indigenous communities is that they're not poor people. They have so much traditional knowledge and creativity, but with this whole narrative that's constantly told to them that progress means the future that we see here with urbanization and technology, their voice and potential is obscured. With unstable farming income as subsistence farmers, they're not able to continue living off the land as easily. They're looking for income, and they end up leaving their communities to become someone else. But materiality is so different. When you make everything you own, you only make what you need. It takes the colors that you see from their clothing is often a reflection of the wood bark or the tea that was harvested on the land. And instead of just buying gold as a form of inheritance, these objects then are passed down from mother to daughter and the generations after. But over the next few years, as I spend more time in indigenous communities, there was really this loss of confidence. This man, he's a tractor driver. His name is Kuldeep Kusharam from Chhattisgarh in Madhya Pradesh. He calls himself a tractor driver and a farmer for a living. But one day he brought me into his house, gave me a cup of chai, and then showed me his paintings. But he hid it from himself. So I ended up thinking about all these incredible cultures and the knowledge that they hold in their hearts that has been obscured by this idea that they should leave, become someone else, learn English and math. And I realized it's not about closing the disparity between rural and urban areas by giving them this form of education to become someone else, but it's formalizing the traditional knowledge and the skills and assets that already exist there. So that's started my journey on starting Roots Studio. A few years later, I went down to Paris to understand how does the cultural world work? How is that set? And this woman was talking about the trends that were coming through. She said these terms, cottagecore, pastoralism, bucolic is going to be really in vogue. And she's like flicking through these slides, and a lot of these images were, there's a lot of Ayurveda going on and things like that. And everyone's just taking notes around that. And it's kind of humorous, right? But I think the underlying sentiment is valid, which is that in our world of hyperconsumption and growth, we're still looking to slow down and also heal. But when it's taken out of context and it loses its connection, and we see these images and these concepts, and it's repackaged and then manufactured into the millions, it's sort of an empty version of itself. And not only that, because a lot of these concepts are borrowed as Eastern mysticism, when communities and people who have been practicing this for centuries see their concepts butchered, it leads to this concept of appropriation. But we're in a space with a lot of accusation and little room for redemption. Everyone doesn't want to end up on Diet Prada. They don't want to get canceled. So we don't try at all, right? But that leads to a world of more homogeneity, and the world will ultimately become just dominated by one aesthetic. It became clear to me that we could actually connect these two worlds together. Why not let the people who've been living in cottages, who are pastoralists, design cottagecore and pastoralism, and actually share their traditional knowledge as well? So Root Studio was started under this idea of bridging global communities, indigenous communities to the global fashion market through 3 pillars: respect, reciprocity, and remuneration. The key elements of respect are around recognition. So for instance, this woman, Birabai, she comes from a matrilineal tribe in Madhya Pradesh, and when her home burned down in Jhabua, Madhya Pradesh, she moved to the city looking for work, but everyone didn't want to hire her because of the tattoos on her face. She finally found a job cutting grass at the front lawn of a museum, and at this museum, she saw people painting. She took the same traditions as a tattoo artist and then started readapting it using paintbrush and acrylic. When we bridged her story with a partner, we made sure that her story was completely told, that her name is on the collection. So they're not just a laborer hidden in the back with the designer title that's from the West. Reciprocity. When you're bridging cultures together, it's really important that both sides of the equation understand what we're saying and made aware. The Warli community in Maharashtra have these incredible motifs and designs that narrate folklore and also other significant parts of their way of life. They said explicitly, we're looking for ways to expand our income, but we don't want any of our sacred motifs to be appearing near the groin area or also on the feet. But there are contexts in which it can show up. So there's ways in which fashion can creatively collaborate as long as there's consent and both sides are well aware of the equation. Lastly, remuneration. If the idea of leaving the village was choosing between earning an income or realizing that people will pay for your traditional knowledge because organic, Zen, and sustainability is now a multi-billion-dollar market, I was damn sure that we could get them paid. This design was licensed through a process in which the artists had pre-approved the designs, and then this hoodie in particular did so well, and it was their highest selling product, but more importantly, because of that success, it was a win-win solution for the community. The community also saw the largest injection of capital spread across not just one artist, but the entire community, because these motifs are all shared together. Now, a lot of the times when people ask me, why am I so passionate about bridging cultures? A lot of times, people wonder, I realize that a lot of times people don't understand that the perception of these communities is extraordinarily one-dimensional. When I went to Chizami village in Nagaland, I realized that even though I might have this intention of wanting to collaborate or bridge, I met a woman who taught me so much about how I should exist in the world, how I should care for the land, and how I should continue on with more respect, compassion, and dignity. And that's the honor that I've had in doing this work all for the last 10 years. And I'm so excited that we are able to bring her all the way here from Chizami village, which is on the border of India, China, and Myanmar. we're so happy to, I'm so happy to see you here after being self-isolated yesterday. How did you get here? Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I started my journey from my village on 29th November in the morning to the state capital where I have to do my COVID test to meet the COVID protocols of UK. And on 30th, I boarded a plane from the only airport of my state to Kolkata, and from Kolkata to Mumbai, and from Mumbai I boarded British Airways, which took me 10.5 hours to land what people call it the grey city, London. Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to be moving out, and then this morning to be with you all.
Yeah, I think she's been on the road for 4 days. I don't know if anyone has spent more time commuting here. No? Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about your community and also Nagaland?
I am from a small community, a Chagasan tribe, which is in the state of Nagaland. Nagaland is a small hilly state in the northeastern region of India, which is also a geostrategic location of the country because we share international boundaries with China, the Tibet, and Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. And this has also made it one of the most militarized region in Asia, or I should say in the world. And it has also many history of conflict, armed conflict. And I would like to focus on, more on the community. Nagaland is, population is only around 2 million, where we have 16 major tribes and other sub-tribes. Agriculture, the farming, subsistence agriculture is the main occupation, and besides that we do peripheral livelihood, which is the craft, the traditional craft, the bamboo craft, the pottery, the beadwork. And it is a rich culture, I should say. The Northeast region itself has more than 200 ethnic groups in the region, and also one of the biodiversity hotspots of the world. And so when it comes to livelihood, it is a diverse livelihood, and the kind of culture, kind of handcrafted work is usually inspired from the environment, from the rich biodiversity around, and each tribe is, can be identified by the kind of ornaments that we wear, by the kind of textile designs that we wear, and it has also a rich oral, music, tradition, and all the culture around the festivals around these are evolved from, agricultural calendar. So I think I'll end up there.
Yeah, you have some beautiful looms with you. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
My family says that, oh, you are wearing a very pale cloth for the occasion. I said, yes, I'm wearing because this is a very treasured one. It's my granny's, maybe the wraparound that I'm wearing is more than 100 years old, because my granny was saying that when the Second World War, Japanese came through our village to the great, battle in Kohima in 1944, and that's the time when she ran to the forest in hiding with her cotton. And so this is something that I treasure very much, and this is something that I have inherited from her. And I'm also wearing this because this is something that my community during the pandemic re-look at the resources, local resources available, and this is the time when, the cotton that they grow in their farmland, they have handspun, and then they have woven during this pandemic. So I felt that this is a very important piece that I should take and share, that, when this kind of pandemic hit us, the only answer is that look within your own ecosystem what is available, within your own reach. So this is it. I'm wearing not really an original stuff. And the thing is that like our village was burnt a couple of times during war. And that is the time when, like most of the traditional, ornaments, the original ornaments that were burnt along with the houses. So, I'm wearing something, but, I feel happy wearing this.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like, you even haven't even gone to the shawl, but when it's so different in terms of designs, having such sacred origins to them, and it's so different than in our world where designs can just, change every single quarter, right? Can you tell us what it means for your designs to feel a sense of what does respect, reciprocity, and remuneration mean when you're looking to collaborate?
When it comes to, the textiles that we use, it's not just a piece of cloth, but it has social meanings to it. It has cultural importance to it. And so when we talk about respect, especially in fashion, I think it's very important to understand the local context, the historical, context, and also the social meanings, the culture meanings, spirituality meanings attached to the piece of cloth. And I think, if you understand that and if you acknowledge that, that's where respect comes in for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of reciprocity, what's the willingness and openness to share?
We live in a world of coexistence. And we are, as indigenous peoples, we are, based on, like sharing. The solidarity economy is very important part of our lifestyle or of our culture. But when, like this trust is misused, that's where, the boundaries comes in, that's where restriction comes in, that's where, rigidity comes in. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge each other, we respect the otherness, and not only what you think is good, but what is good to others also, and that's very important aspect.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to work between collectivist versus individualist societies and how we decide what do we protect as our own versus how do we share. Can you share also a little bit about what livelihoods and remuneration means to the weavers and the producers in your community?
I work with a women's organization called Northeast Network. Northeast Network started a livelihood program way back in 2008, especially when it comes to textile. We started to revive, like or keep the tradition of weaving textiles alive, and also create an opportunity to bring in sustainable livelihoods to the women, to the stakeholders who are mostly like marginalized, having a very small plot of land to cultivate. So it is this time that we feel that, it's important that side by side, when we talk about the social enhancement programs, it is also important to enhance livelihood opportunities, and that's when we started, like working with the weavers, and we feel that, like they deserve to be, remunerated, that the kind of time that goes into, like weaving a piece of cloth, because it's all handcrafted, and that has to be understood. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge that bit when you try to collaborate.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting to think about the role of money when it's production for life, to sustain yourself and to be able to afford an education or buy seeds for the planting, versus money in the context of just profit maximization.
Yes.
Can you share also a little bit about how COVID-19 affected your community?
When COVID-19, the lockdown was announced, and it was sudden. We heard about, the pandemic, that's like the COVID that is now spreading, that was last year. And, it was taken, like for the first time in our generation that we felt that the world has come to a halt, regardless of rich, regardless of, like less developed or developing countries. And that was time where our community, I am from the rural area of Nagaland, so the impact was not as much as my friends who are in urban areas, because their livelihood depends on, like the small things that they do. There are workers in some shops, in some private sectors, and particularly the women whom we work, the street vendors in the urban settings of the state. They were the ones who were the most impacted because they could not really earn a livelihood because complete lockdown was imposed. And I think that was also the time when we could see that our communities came together in solidarity to people who are disadvantaged during this lockdown. So there is this whole thing of community mobilization, women coming together, going into the forest to forage the green herbal, edibles, the green, the forest food, and gathering those and sending off to urban areas. It's also like during this time when, a lot of our young people came back to the village. They were out in the city working in some small private sectors and all. They came back. The community, organized a quarantine center where we don't call it a quarantine center, but a creativity hub where, the bamboo craft, the weaving stuff, the knitting stuff were made available, and the young people who have come back from the cities were, occupied with those creative, little joyful things during quarantine, and it did help a lot, and it is also something that a lot of other communities also appreciated what our community did, because it was trauma to come back. Suddenly they have to rush, they have to catch trains, they have to look for vehicles, and when they landed in the village, that was the space given in a nearby forest, where is open space where some of these creative little joyful things were made available to them at thus, even that's changing the whole, face of what pandemic is really, because we were all scared and everybody was so stressed about, the developments on this disease.
Yeah, and I think the other crisis, climate change, we all are talking about in these high-level policy rooms, but as people who live off the land, when a monsoon season is late or the rains don't come, it completely affects your life, right? You can't just go to the grocery store to buy more things. How has climate change affected you and your community?
Climate change is a reality for all of us. We live in one planet. And when I talk about my community, our community live on subsistence agriculture, and we are dependent on favorable climate. And that's the time when, our people suffer when there is, this erratic rainfall, where there is, rising temperature and drying up of our water sources, and, pest disease, this crop disease. So it's like, we are like any other indigenous communities who are dependent on land are affected, impacted badly. And the kind of, strategy, or I should say, resilient, or I should say, the living culture that we try to promote is, agrobiodiversity. You promote diverse food. You grow diverse food so that you are not, affected that way that you have to starve. So I think, it's also to do with any other production patterns that you can't live on one thing. You need diverse livelihood. You need diverse ecosystems. And I think that's...
I mean, you've done such an incredible lifetime of work in gender advocacy, advocating for stewardship of the land. What brought you on this path, and what message do you have for all of us today?
I believe on the principles, the values of respect, compassion, dignity, fairness for myself and for others. And that's the reason why I have taken this path. To be part of the healing process, I think we all need to be part of the healing process. To be part of, this changing scenario, especially in times of climate change, in times of pandemic, it is important for us to pause a while to listen to our own heartbeats, and also to listen to the heartbeat of the land that you are standing, to breathe the air, to breathe the water, to feel you know, the heartbeat of our planet is important, and I think this is the moment that we have all come here for that reason.
Thank you.
Thank you.